what it means to be free of that prison.
Jesus. What the fuck? Can't deflect. I need to figure out how I can deflect this shit. What is that?
You cannot imagine what it means.
It's like deflecting my damage or something.
You cannot imagine what it means to be free of that prison. Oh, damn it!
Holy fuck, man, this guy takes no damage. I just... He's flying now. There's gotta be something I'm not doing. Just pentagram.
Dante, you took the bait like Eve at the apple. Foul human!
Fuck. Bro, loosen.
Cursed mongrel!
I am doing no damage. This is a joke. No more points left. So, please let me go, Lucifer. Almighty. Oh hell no! I ain't doing this on hard, man. Fuck this! I've had enough of this game. Let's see what the easy one's like.
You cannot imagine what it means to be free of that prison.
Oh, you just get stunned just from my right clicks.
Like Eve at the apple. Truly suffer. Damn you!
Maybe his weakness is the
Insolent! Foul human! Feel the pain I have felt!
one of those hits and I would kill him.
Classic.
Jeez, even normal these guys don't take that. I swear, it's gotta be something I'm not doing. Like, is he supposed to go on these things? Because it's supposed to line up here. His health bar is not going down.
Insolent creature. Foul human! Yield to my supremacy! Insolent creature!
What the fuck? How much damage has he taken casual mode? Classic. What an insulting word. Just, okay, he takes a lot of damage. Even this feels like he has so much health. Yeah, this is some grind action. Switch it to hard mode just before I kill him. Grab him. And then I'll die one shot before I actually kill him. It's a critical or something.
Foul human! Feel the pain I have felt!
Look at these candle things you can even lit off. I wonder if you're supposed to light them or something. This one's not lit. Maybe you see? Okay, those things hit.
Have done far worse than I. I stood for my fellow angels, for reason and justice, and then he made you in his image. You, the flawed creation, and I was to bow down to you. My gratitude for breaking the chains of Judecca. You dolt! Behold your ruin, and witness my escape into the kingdom of purgatory and paradise! I am sovereign of the underworld and the afterlife! And lead the world at we'll no longer suffer in this land, but shall be free. Wait! There's just one last minor detail with which I ought to make you familiar. You're dead, Dante. You can't go anywhere. Not a single soul may leave this place. It is forbidden by him. I am so sick of you. I will reclaim my rightful place in paradise. My path will be paved with the sins of man, and yours, Dante, shall be the bedrock of my return. And all that is good shall be gone from the universe forever!
Not yet. I have collected many souls on this pilgrimage. Souls that I have freed from this Inferno. And together, they now possess the power to free me. Father, mother, brothers, absolve me!
This power, Dante, we can use it together. You and I, friend. Just think what we could achieve.
I would rather not.
Dante, I can reunite you with Beatrice. Together, we will rule the three kingdoms of the afterlife.
It's not going to happen.
Dante.
I did not die, and I did not live.
What the hell is that? It's a snake. Inferno difficulty, yeah, about that. I don't think I want to play difficulty. I have to play that hard mode. Making a baby. influential he is.
Most people are interested to know what happens when we die.
And even in contemporary culture now, we still find a fascination with death. What's next? Everybody wants to know, where do I go when I die? So it's an age-old theme.
What are the consequences to the choices we make in life? That is what Dante's Inferno explores, dealing with the consequences to the choices we make in life.
Dante Alighieri is one of the most prominent medieval poets. He's really in a small group of very influential writers who've had these works that have kind of lasted throughout time. There's something magical about Dante's Inferno and the Divine Comedy in general, where the language is so vibrant and his descriptions are so intense that it's, I think, one of the major reasons why it's lived on.
The thing he does best, perhaps, is create in a very few words memorable and striking visual images. He coins with astonishing skill these unforgettable pictures in words.
Really the central figure of the Divine Comedy and one of the central figures in Dante's personal and spiritual life is Beatrice Portinari. We don't know a ton about her. We do know that the two of them met at a party when they were both 9 years old.
And Dante admired her from afar. He claimed he fell in love with her at first sight when they were 9 years old. And he is said to have written after he saw her again that she smiled at him. And he was thrilled about that, but that also indicates that they probably didn't have a really close relationship. She may not even have known he was interested in her.
Dante and Beatrice are never lovers. They're never really together. They both married separately. She died quite young, in her early 20s, and this is devastating to Dante because he had held her up as his feminine ideal, as a spiritual ideal. And when she died, we're told that he just went into an insane depression.
It was kind of one of those things that, it never happened for them. And he obviously regretted that his whole life, because when he got sent to exile and he chose to write what ended up being his defining work, it's all inspired by her. That poem would not exist if it weren't for Beatrice.
And one of the big things that I think made the Divine Comedy so significant for its time is that it was written in the common vernacular of Italian.
And in those days, there wasn't a lot of reading and writing in general, and a lot of texts, particularly religious texts, were in the ancient languages, but Dante chooses to write in the language of the Italians, and because of that, he's read aloud even in his own lifetime, and as his work is handed down, the sort of larger population is able to enjoy it.
But as well as increasing the size of Dante's potential audience, the choice of the vernacular also conditions the nature of the poem that he writes. It makes possible the force and the vigor and the concision and the liveliness of his images and the colloquial nature of the exchanges among characters. It adds immeasurably to the drama and to the excitement of the poem as we have it today.
It would almost be kind of like going to the movies for us today. It's kind of like a very kind of mainstream consciousness about what the afterlife is like. That really hadn't been done in that way prior to that. Most of the descriptions of what the afterlife might be like were really received on very sort of disciplined religious terms, if you will.
After the invention of the printing press in 1440, we see the first appearance of the Divine Comedy in print, as opposed to in manuscript form.
People could pick it up and read it, and it was a ton of people read it, and actually people thought that it was almost an extension of the Bible. They thought that it was true.
Very cleverly, he casts himself in the poem. He's the main character. It's a first-person piece of literature, which is very unique for the time. Him putting himself there and speaking to people that he knows and political figures that he knows a lot about, or mythological figures that he spent a lot of time researching and knew a lot about. It makes it all come to life in an amazing way that doesn't feel like a flight of fantasy. It feels like he actually went there. That's, I think, probably that's kind of the war of the worlds of the time or whatever. He kind of fooling people, think, did he really go there? Did he have this experience?
There isn't really a description of hell in the way that our contemporary culture imagines hell to be. It was really Dante Alighieri, in a way, in the way he had written about hell and described it, somehow has become kind of a permanent mainstay in the way we imagine hell to be.
And in the Divine Comedy, what Dante is trying to do is fuse the art of his poetry with the substance of his ideas about human life and about the life to come. So he's trying to create a verbal artifact which will have such an impression on its reader that not only will the reader step back and say, gosh, that's beautiful, but he or she will also say, wow, that makes you think.
He's obviously influenced a huge number of artists that followed in behind him, from music and painting and sculptures.
The history of illustration of the Divine Comedy, of course, goes back to the very beginning, to the manuscripts of the 14th century. And there's a long tradition since then of interpretation and response to the text of the poem. The interesting thing is that this wonderful array of visual response to Dante all comes from the same source. All these artists, after all, are working with the same text.
So around the time that Delacroix is really kind of pushing that Romantic era on the continent, across the Channel, in England, a guy named William Blake really becomes almost the central figure for reinventing Dante. He's very forward-thinking in terms of kind of bringing his madness to his work. He spends, like many other artists, his life working on Dante, and he literally was painting one of the watercolors from Dante on the day that he died. So he worked on it all the way up to his death, much like Rodin.
And the idea that, the Rodin's The Thinker, one of the world's most famous statues, that is Dante Alighieri, contemplating the gates of hell, I think is a fascinating statement of something that everybody knows. That statue, you look at it, around the world, everyone knows who the thinker is. And to have that be, a portrait of Dante Alighieri, I think really says something, speaks to the importance of his work and how that's carried through, to modern times.
It's cold. I thought hell was supposed to be hot.
Hell is a complicated and nuanced place that transcends cliches, Dante.
Oh, you don't say. I was totally expecting to see demons and tortures and bondage stuff and, I don't know, like rubber and chicks in stiletto heels.
This is hell, Dante, not your personal fantasy.
I think everybody, when the idea of the illustration of the Divine Comedy comes to mind, everybody perhaps still thinks first of all of Gustave Doré.
Doré is a 19th century French illustrator. He had an amazing affection for the Divine Comedy drawings. And I think what's unusual about them is that they're very technical in nature. They're incredibly violent. They're probably some of the first drawings that really capture the violence of Inferno. And he's very, very specific and methodical about following exactly what Dante wrote. And in that sense, his adaptation, if you will, is the tightest of almost any artist that's taken on the project. One of the things that's really interesting about Dante is that obviously it's an amazing artistic and intellectual achievement, but it's also always been commercially viable. And in the 20th century, we've even seen Disney and, of course, Electronic Arts now sort of using Dante as a platform to create entertainment experiences that are going to sell. He's always been both, kind of that artist favorite, but also something that's commercially viable. He is remembered, and he is continually brought up again and again in culture, and high culture, and pop culture. The game project has made a lot of people interested in Dante again, and that with each kind of new adaptation or new tweak on the Divine Comedy, there's a kind of resurgence in people finding out about him and about his life and about the poem.
this game, hell is the main character. It's the venue is the main character. That's really what the score is about. The vastness of it, the infinity of it. It's old, it's archaic, it's older than human history.
My thought was not to do the typical orchestral score, certainly not the typical game or even movie score, but to do something really unique for this environment.
Definitely we're trying to suggest something that's larger than what will actually fit onto screen. We want to expand well beyond that and to make you feel constantly surrounded, enveloped by the immensity of the score.
This was something sonically unusual, something that had to match these vast expanses of visually stunning and yet frightening environments that the music was going to accompany.
We felt that there had to be a really human connectedness. Hell is practically built out of souls, so we really had to push all the vocal components to the front and center of every moment just to kind of keep reminding you, like, yep, there's just thousands and thousands and thousands of souls down here. The vocal stylings that you hear throughout the score, I guess one name for it is atonal or aleatoric. The style is very closely affiliated with two composers from the 20th century, Penderecki and Ligeti.
It's something that was used commonly in the late 20th century, but it's a very unusual technique, and the cool thing about it is that it never sounds the same twice.
But the person who really brought it to the public was Kubrick, in most notably in 2001, but later in films like The Shining.
We used Enochian as the language for Dante's Inferno because some believe that it is both the language of heaven and hell. But over the centuries since then, it's come to have a darker, demonic meaning.
The sound is very chaotic, and you might think that we just kind of wing it with the chorus and tell them, do some wailing here and there, but the exact opposite is true. It's the score is really, really specific notes.
To hear. You can hear the trumpets.
There are precious few large-scale rooms left in London. It's basically either Abbey Road Studio 1 or Air Studios.
Here we were in London. We had really two of the best recording groups in the world.
Metro Voices was recommended to us. We knew we were going to be recording in London, and they're well known for their film work. Some of the Harry Potter films, 300.
Abbey Road, of course, famous for recording the Beatles, also has one of the great large orchestral sound stages in the world.
We chose Abbey Road partially because, well, there's just not that many large rooms left. We knew we needed a large room to kind of achieve just the bombast of the score.
It's a huge studio, it's a vast space, and the wonderful thing about that is that the room ambience is able to blossom. I tried to use the orchestra and also other special sounds that we created, whether it's with percussion instruments or special sounds that I asked the orchestra to do. For instance, at times we'd ask the entire orchestra to stomp their feet.
One of the key things to remember about how pro these musicians are is that there is no rehearsal time. They're looking at the score for the very first time.
We asked them to do things that may have never been asked by any composer before.
The whole concept of unbaptized children in hell really comes from the kind of medieval belief system that children who die before they're baptized, they'll spend eternity in limbo, which is the first circle of hell, and it's kind of the perpetual waiting room of eternity.
The design itself, early on, we had a pretty small team, and we contracted with Wayne Barlow.
One of Wayne's great contributions to the whole character design was bringing in the umbilical cord and the placenta, and it was just super creepy and then just, you know, very, very Wayne Barlow.
And then someone came up with, how about we sever the arms and the bone goes into a blade?
And they attack you as this large pack.
Suddenly, when the babies were cooing and giggling as they were chasing, and then when you started hacking at them with your scythe and they started crying like babies do, it became much more real and much more disturbing, and wow, I'm attacking babies.
The introduction of the baby was important to me. When you walk in that room in limbo and you see the baby for the first time, I really wanted that to be believable as a baby, sort of like a toddler look to it. And anybody that's got kids knows that there's just a very unique way that they walk. And I just didn't think hand animating that, as good animators as we have, was gonna do it. And I really wanted to motion capture a toddler to just get that walk.
When Jordan first approached me about using Mario in a game, he was just really thinking out loud. And we started to talk about it very casually, not even knowing if it was actually gonna be a possibility. It was just an idea.
J.K. brought in his son to play one of the roles. It's an unbaptized baby. Typically, we don't capture a ton of infants or young children, so it is a challenge in itself.
It took like an hour for the crew to put all those marks on him. He was so patient. I was such a proud mama.
To have an 18-month-old baby on the set, dressed up in the mocap suit, was just such a treat for everybody. It's just not something anybody on the set had ever really seen before or done before. So it was a treat, and it just made that day kind of a little more fun than any other day.
I just thought it was actually kind of the different thing that you do with your family instead of just a typical stroll in the mall or outing at the park. So that's pretty awesome. Only thing as a mom was for me to make sure that he will not touch the hundreds and thousands of cameras all around him. And you know, that was pretty stressful, but fun and surreal.
It worked out really, really well today, and I think everybody was kind of happy about that because they didn't know what to expect. So we may actually have an actor on our hands. I think the bug might have caught him, you know?
I saw a fire that overcame a half-world of darkness.
That's a card.
It's a weird idea that babies would be in hell, and so our babies are definitely pretty upset about their fate, and they're going to attack the player. They're mad, and they're going to swarm him, and it'll get pretty crazy. But in that first moment when they kind of climb out and they start walking toward Dante, I definitely want people to be a little bit confused about whether they're supposed to attack or wait and see, or just sort of think about how they feel about it.
Trials of St. Lucia is a downloadable expansion that brings multiplayer co-op and content creation to the Dante's Inferno game. At the heart of it, there's an easy-to-use and full-featured game editor that you can custom create trials, adding waves of enemies, including enemies from the core game, as well as some enemies like the Summoner, which are exclusive to Trials of St. Lucia. We also have a co-op online mode that allows 2 players to team up as either Dante or St. Lucia.
St. Lucia of Syracuse is a 3rd century Christian martyr. She has her eyes plucked out because she refuses to marry her pagan suitor, and she's mentioned in the Divine Comedy a couple times, including at the beginning of Inferno. She's sort of Dante's guardian angel.
Because the trials exist on our online service, players can download them, rate the trials as well as the creators, who then individually score on the leaderboards.
There's this big meta ranking system to find out who's the best of the best at designing great challenges. We're really excited to bring multiplayer to Dante's Inferno. You're going to be able to play online with your friends and kind of defeat waves of enemies, but also the coolest thing is putting the power of the combat editor into the hands of players.
My name is Wayne Barlow. I have been an author and illustrator for the last 30 some odd years, and for maybe the last 20 years I've immersed myself in research and an interest in hell. I had a fairly extensive background in biology and pretty much layer that into all of the creative creature design and character design that I've been called upon to do. When I first heard that Dante was going to be translated into a game, I was both amazed, intrigued, and thought it was a brilliant idea. What I was striving for with the creature and character design here was drawing in large part on notions of the surreal, but also because I'm such a lover of history, pulling in a lot of those kind of vague historical references. Gigantism is something that I like playing around with, and in my hell images, it was as amped up as I could possibly make it. In terms of the psychology of human souls as they are imposed on that world, what could be better than to minimize each of them by suggesting that a world is filled with gigantic and kind of foreboding sights. When I do character design, I like doing small details to show how things work. Seeing what Cleopatra's tongue might actually work like in a game was kind of an appealing sidebar. When I started to tinker with the angels, I wanted them to look light yet powerful. Sweeping curves and those sorts of lines were working for me when it came to the angels, in direct contrast to the more convoluted shapes and forms that were in hell. Charon was a challenge. Again, being so fond of history, I was trying very hard to harken back to an ancient look for him, either Greek or to some degree Middle Eastern on the right-hand figure. This might actually be my favorite of the approaches towards Charon of the lot. The shapes are working nicely, and I think that it's a rather more inventive approach than some of my earlier ones. I like the idea of something looking absolutely impossible to have come out of that body. To having her open up and just be some over-the-top, ridiculous, organism, it was really appealing to me. And you look at that and you say, well, I have no idea how that could happen. But in the world of film and game, it can. Gee, that's a toss-up. Which do I like working on more, lust or gluttony? I'd probably lean towards gluttony because the design considerations were a lot more abstract. For example, the gluttony level was just amazing and a beautiful rendition of my sketches come to life. This was an earlier look for Cerberus. This was a fun exploration for me. It's a massive character now, and the notion of it disgorging its various mouths, I think this may really have been the first attempt that kind of evolved into what it finally wound up being. It occurred to me with the unbaptized babies that, it seemed a perfect solution to take a placenta and wrap it around and just sort of turn it into an organic fig leaf, if you will. Yes, Midas is endlessly coveting other people's things, so he needs a lot of eyes. And in this case, I was riffing on both medieval and Renaissance and ancient forms in terms of his crown and his collar and beard and all. This is an early take on Minos, and one of the prerequisites was the tail being an integral part of this character and how it wrapped around the central column, I think a specific number of times to indicate levels that people were going to be consigned to. When I was thinking about the Queen, if a good idea popped into my head, then that would be where I would start. If not, I would start with the female form and then just start letting my pencil play around with it a little bit. Lines suggest themselves and turn into things. It's a very organic approach for me. Putting a new spin on Satan, that's always tough. Certain conventions needed to be adhered to, but the trick is to sort of visually phrase them in a way that is different. I am hopeful that they will feel that they're not seeing something like what they've seen before. This was a terrific project to work on, and the people that I worked with couldn't have been better to work with.
Hi, I'm Steve Desilets, lead designer for Dante's Inferno. I trust by now you've seen most of the Circles of Hell, but let me show you another one. It's called game development. If you want to know why this game could only have been made at Visceral Games, you don't need to look any further than Gluttony. That circle expresses certain elements and themes that I know I wouldn't have gotten permission to do in any other place I've worked.
Gluttony was one of those ones that kind of brought up, a little bit of that toilet humor kind of stuff.
Bile, vomit, poop.
Dante's Inferno stays very true to what makes Visceral Games a very unique studio. It fits really well with what the studio is good at, creating compelling content in dark and dangerous places. Mind-blowing kind of moments, whether it's horror or action or adventure, it's pushing the limits of what you can do in a game.
Searching for reference material on this game has been pretty brutal. Corpses, mummies, different torture, stuff that I never thought I'd be looking at on the internet.
I was in a meeting with 2 other people, and I guess the concept flashed up on my email, and all I saw were their faces go like,
Wow, yeah, haven't seen that before.
This isn't really a term that applies to our team.
I myself have 2 giant crosses on my desk. We use those every time we reference a cross move, I should put it around my chain and just walk around all day blessing people.
Ooh, you'd get fired at most places for talking about what we talk about on a daily basis.
We don't have to worry about anybody getting offended. I've got a naked picture of Cleopatra on my desk, and that's okay.
I probably have 200 pictures of intestines on my machine.
I keep asking EA to allow us to set things on fire in the parking lot, but they won't let us do it.
Defecation, bodies cut in half. There have been some emails sent out that...
Sometimes you'll come into work and you'll go to the kitchen to get coffee, and there's just some guy over there with a broomstick, and he's looking at himself in the mirror doing this or going,
We actually bought a scythe from a farming shop, farmers, monthly, whatever. So we bought this scythe. As soon as we got the scythe's got the little handles, no, this ain't gonna work.
No, the scythe they got in the mail, I think, was kind of a little small.
Yeah, we actually use a hockey stick for, the scythe stand-in while we're acting out.
there'll be sort of an open conference room place, and there's sort of fake fighting. I kind of hope that no one gets hurt.
There will always be people that see video games as for kids. When they see what's going on in our game, they're like, whoa, you can't show that to kids. This game isn't for kids.
Cleopatra is kind of the monster boss character of Lust. She was tricky, we went through a bunch of iterations on her. We had some early concepts that were just sex organs all over her body and her fingers and her face. Ultimately not a character that I think would have served the game.
One of the things we added to our game was what we call ribbon technology. Elements in the game, such as the tapestry that's attached to Dante, the ribbons that come from his wrist, are full physics objects, and so Lucifer got his use of ribbons in a very unique area.
He's quite naked, and we have some pretty sweet technology to make that as high-tech as possible.
Lots of dangling going on.
And you've got two guys, a technical guy and a modeler, both sat there, Can you see the dangle there? Is it dangling enough? Is it dangling realistically? There was many days spent on doing that.
We had arguments on size. We were going back and forth, and I personally pushed for really, really large size.
Let's just say that some of the team members had some fun late at night playing with those values.
I had it dragging beneath him, it was like a donkey. He was just scraping it along the ground, and then he starts flying, and it's dangling in the air and waving around. And it was in there for a little while because I accidentally submitted it. By accident.
It's gotten so gross that there's no outgrossing each other.
You gave it a right
the biggest
time,
prank we play on each other is when people go on vacation, we cover their desks in unicorns and rainbows. Maybe it's called cornify. There's an official word for it. You walk through the gates of hell to get to where we work. And you go to Wes's desk and it's covered in unicorns.
What is hell? What's it going to be like? Early on, we were just kind of joking around. We could make a game just filled with tons of cubicles and call it a day.
We thought about maybe having our take on the shades, maybe putting people to piss us off down into hell.
Sitting in a dentist's chair.
No hate mails yet, but we're kind of hoping for some.
We actually haven't received any of that. I mean, we've seen sort of the forum flames, but that's going to come from anything that's on the internet.
No hate mail. No. Some people have been a little, I guess, surprised that this is something I would want to do.
What comes after hell? Well, you know, we're truthful to the poem, so there's some hints there, certainly.
Dante wrote about Purgatorio, the 7 deadly sins, it's the Garden of Eden. There is, you know, stuff that's just as iconic as what we saw in the Inferno.
It doesn't take a wild imagination to think where we're going to go with this next.
That's cool. Shadow Lucifer. I don't know what full screen means. There's one DLC I haven't played yet.
At the midpoint on the journey of life, I found myself in a dark forest, for the clear path was lost.
I have everything.
Dante, I knew you'd come.
Beatrice, is that you? What's happening?
I will send the poet to guide you. You must hurry.
Beatrice, don't be afraid. I am coming home for you.
We should fear only that which has the power to harm us. I am made such by the grace of God. Hurry, Dante.
Oh, it's that guy. That's a fucking maze. Travel east. So it's gotta be this one. See him running here. Travel east. This was just follow him. This goes back. Lost. The moonlight shines from the north. Okay, so you go east of the moonlight. Then east is here. Fuck this, man. Oh, I can be fooled. GG. This game was really cool, actually. I just wish they had a better camera. Gates of Hell. It's defeat the ways. Oh, it's like a horde mode.